Hi, I'm Maggie.
And I'm Marin, and you're listening to Girlhood Movie Database, a podcast where we deconstruct and muse on depictions of girlhood in film, literature, and other media.
A feminist celebration of pop culture, the audacity of youth, and the ways we grow away from and into our bodies, beliefs, and dreams for ourselves and each other.
And today we are discussing
Girls Will Be Girls.
I have a rush in my body right now just because it's been a little bit since we recorded. And once we started talking, my body, it just underwent a physiological change.
Oh.
In a good way.
Yeah.
It's exciting. Okay, Girls Will Be Girls is the movie we are discussing today. Girls Will Be Girls, written and directed by Shuchi Talati. It premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in the U.S. in January of 2024 and then was released to audiences, general viewing audiences, on December 18th, 2024. So a relatively recent movie. We don't have a tagline this week. It's an indie movie, very artful movie. I feel like this movie contains a lot of multitudes and nuances and minutia that would be undercut by a tagline. So I'm okay that they didn't even try to attempt one. I do have a log line. I always say I do have a log line, like I'm the one who produces this log line. But what I mean is that I have a log line that I've copy and pasted that someone else came up with that Maggie's going to read for us.
In a strict boarding school nestled in the Himalayas, 16-year-old Mira discovers desire and romance. But her rebellious sexual awakening is disrupted by her mother, who never got to come of age herself.
What do you think?
I think it's okay. I feel like that last line saying like the mother never got to come of age herself is, I don't know. The emotional resonance of this film, I would argue, is really in the mother and daughter relationship between Mira and her mother, and the ways that we see her mother existing and the way we come to understand that perhaps her mother's coming of age was interrupted is so embedded in the experience of watching the film that I don't like that it's included in the log line because it makes it seem as though it's right on the surface. And the film is better than that.
I would agree. I think that's a much more thoughtful reading of the log line than what I had when I first read it, because I watched this movie twice. And the first time I watched it, I had to rent it on VOD because that was the only way to access it. And I saw this exact log line before I clicked play. And maybe this says more about me than the film. But when I got to the end there and it says that Mira's sexual awakening is disrupted by her mother, who never got to come of age of her own, I interpreted that to mean something quite dark. Where I was like, oh, is her mom gonna like swoop in and hit on and have an affair with this boy that she is seeing? I am glad to report that fear or assumption was totally off base. But there's just something I think about the way the logline is phrased. This idea that the mother disrupts the daughter's sexual awakening makes it seem like the sexual awakening is being transferred to the mother or something. And that's why I was like, oh, is this about something that's going to be really upsetting to watch? And then it ended up not being about that. And the mother's a much lovelier and rounder character than that. But that was where my brain initially went. And maybe I'm crazy for going there, but that's where I went.
No, I don't think that you're crazy at all for going there. I think that because obviously I didn't see that log line until now. So I've already had the experience of watching the film and I knew very little about it. I knew the title and I had seen the trailer, which doesn't give away too much.
Yeah. And I
That's all I
had
need to
not
know.
seen a trailer when I first read this. I should say that too.
Yeah. And so what I'm feeling like a little bit of rage boiling up in me, because if you had come across that log line without having seen the trailer, without having any sense of what the film was actually about, I just feel like somebody watched this film and that's what they fucking took from it. The mother, I would argue, ends up guiding Mira in her sexual awakening, and in ways like ensuring that she is as safe as can be. The mother knows it's happening the whole time, but it also tells me that whoever watched that and then wrote the log line, if it wasn't just a robot, who knows? But robots are fucking stupid, so fuck them too. Like, that they interpreted those scenes where Mira's mother, what's Mira's mother's name?
Anila.
Yeah. Where Anila is showing like genuine care for this young boy, for this young man
Srinivas,
who doesn't have parental guidance, who has kind of just been thrown out into the world in many ways, that they've interpreted that as Anila somehow trying to live out her sexual awakening through this young boy, which is not what's happening at all. It's an obvious maternal response. If anything, it's a transference of her maternal feelings, but her desire to care for her child. And the way she wishes she could care for Mira, Mira doesn't allow her to. And maybe there's a transference of her caring for Shri, the way she wished she could care for her daughter. Her daughter doesn't let her. That's what it seemed obvious to me what was actually happening.
Yes. Right. Exactly.
But somebody watched it and just decided to somehow turn Anila into someone with like a sinister motives.
It read as nefarious to me. Okay, let's run down briefly what happens in this movie. The movie starts and we meet Mira, who is 16 years old. And the opening scene of the movie, she attends a boarding school where boys and girls both attend, but they have separate living spaces. They don't attend classes together really. Or maybe they do. No, there is a scene where she's in class with boys, but like the interaction between the boys and the girls in the school is very much surveilled, and the teachers and administration at the school are very intentional about trying to limit the interaction between the boys and there's not a lot of social interaction between the boys and the girls, I should say. And so at the beginning of the movie, they're all at this assembly together, and it's announced that Mira has been named head prefect of the whole school. So she is the student who has been given like the most authority of all the students. So she has the ability to report students for uniform infractions and correct them and report like behavioral problems that she's seeing to the other teachers and to the principal. So she has a lot of responsibility that puts her in the favor of the teachers and administration, but then also sets her apart from the other students, even though she's still a student herself. And we learned that in the history of the school, she is the first girl to be named head prefect ever. She also meets a new student whose name is Srinivas. He goes by Shri. And he has just started at this new school. His father is a diplomat, so he's lived all over the world, hasn't stayed at one school for very long. So he's now moved from Hong Kong to India. He's staying at this boarding school. His parents are not nearby. He wants permission to put up a poster about his astronomy club that she grants him permission for. And they meet, and they are immediately quite smitten with each other. She goes to his astronomy club meeting. They stay afterwards and talk. And she gives him her phone number, but she's like, if my mom picks up, hang up. And, you know, all that stuff that you do. And she likes him and she wants to figure out a way to see him again. But in the school setting that she's in, boys and girls are not really allowed to date. Something that she's told by one of her superiors is like, hey, I want you to talk to this student because she's getting too close to this other boy. So there's a lot of anxiety about social relationships and potentially romantic relationships between male and female students. Mira is studying for a lot of really important exams, and so her mom lives in a house in the town where the boarding school is, so Mira often goes home on the weekends. And Mira's mom, Anila, finds out that Mira is talking to Shri on the phone and tells her that I don't want you to have to keep secrets from me. Mira's cousin has recently run off with some boy, and Anila says that like the reason for that is her family put too many restrictions on her and now she's never going to come back. And I don't want that to happen to you. So Anila calls the school and is able to finagle so that Shri is able to leave campus, visit their home. They can study together. And of course, Anila is there to supervise them, but they are still able to spend time together and grow closer. And in the process of that, Shri also grows closer with Anila, who just provides him, like Maggie said earlier, with just like a maternal comfort because he's in this new country, in this new school. He doesn't have any family. She's nice to him. And he seems to enjoy talking to her too. And so that causes a lot of tension. And you get the sense that Mira is really frustrated by her mom's presence in the relationship. And that just causes a lot of friction. On top of this is the fact that Mira's really curious about sex and her body, and she wants to try these new things with Shri because they really like each other. And it's hard to find the privacy and space to do that, which also causes tension with her mom. Lots of things come to a head when boys at school really start antagonizing Mira. She had reported that a bunch of them were taking pictures of up girls' skirts, and then one of them got suspended for it, and then they try to take revenge, and it's really upsetting. They chase her around, and it's actually really distressing to watch. And then they tell one of the head teachers that this boy has been going over to Mira's house and all these things that Mira could potentially get in trouble for. Eventually, after having a big fight with her mom, she calls her mom and she's like, I need your help. And her mom comes to the school and is very protective of her daughter and says, I get to decide who comes into my home. And the teacher's like, well, we could expel her for this if the rumors are true that she had sex with this boy. And it's really emotionally difficult for Mira and Anila. And Mira and her mom eventually go home. Shri comes over to visit one last time, and I feel like now I'm getting too much into interpretation. So I'll just say that they break up. She breaks up with him. And the movie ends with Anila and Mira together on the roof. And Mira breaks down crying after everything that she's experienced. And her mom comforts her.
I think that sums it up.
While also not capturing a lot of what makes this film really great. Because it's such a naturalistic movie, and there's a real attention to realism, I think, that makes describing some of the details really hard, because you see them and you feel their authenticity and their humanness, but when you try to put that into words, it feels impossible. Maggie, you chose this movie for us to talk about. So I would love to know what your reaction was to this movie, your origin story, so to speak.
I don't know how I found out about it. I feel like I just watch a lot of indie movies and find my way to them. So my first watch was just for this podcast after it was picked. It was one of those movies where the watching experience is akin to finishing a book. It feels that complete. I'm trying to figure out what exactly it is I mean by, it feels like having read a book. But for me, there are some movies that make me feel nourished, which is a word I don't really like, but I don't know what other word to use, that make me feel similarly filled up in the way I do when I read something that really resonates.
I mean, I think there is perhaps literary quality to the movie in the sense, even though the movie is not based on a novel or anything, just in the sense that it feels akin to the best kind of like character driven type of novel.
Yeah.
In that, if you were reading it on the page, there would be these written details of how the characters behave or what they say that immediately add a lot of texture to them very quickly. And I think this movie, similarly, using its visual medium and its dialogue, does that really, really well. At the very beginning, you see when they're about to announce who the head prefect is going to be. And they preface it by saying, for the first time, we have a student from the girls' school. And immediately everyone looks at Mira because they know if it's going to be a girl, it's going to be you. And we see her react and be like, oh my God. And immediately have to compose herself because then she has to go up to the podium and lead the entire school saying the school pledge. And so we see her experience all kinds of stages of processing this moment in a very brief amount of time. And we see the way the environment is reacting to her as well, which tells us something about her position in it. And so it's really succinct, but it's also really layered. And I guess what it comes down to is it's good writing. This movie is really well written, I would say. It's just as well written, I think, as it is acted and directed, which is not always the case. Because sometimes you really have to rely on actors to elevate like a shitty line or something, and that doesn't really happen here. So that would be my take on it. I don't know if that's what you were getting at.
I think it is just that. It feels literary. It does. In the sense that it wants you to read it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't want you to just watch it. You can certainly do that. But if you do that, you're going to end up potentially with an interpretation like we get with our log line.
Yes.
But you need to actually read into and around the characterization.
Mm-hmm. I will say that the first time I watched this, which was a while ago now, I, by total coincidence, ended up watching it the same weekend I saw 28 Years Later. And it ended up being a surprisingly compelling double feature experience. Because, yes, 28 Years Later is a zombie movie. And it's a very fucking good zombie movie at that. I really don't have patience for fanboys on the internet who were like, this is a lame ass zombie movie when you literally have like zombies with monster hogs ripping people out by their spines. Like, what more could you fucking want from a zombie movie? I don't know. That's not relevant to this movie. But that movie has this really unexpected emotional core about a boy's relationship with his mother that I found so fucking moving. I was sobbing in the theater just quietly watching it. And then I had to watch this movie, and I knew that it was a movie that centered a mother-daughter relationship. But like I said, the logline made my brain a little wonky. So I was pleasantly surprised when I started watching it, and I was like, oh, this has a similarly deft emotional core to this mother-daughter relationship that is getting at something that was totally not what I expected, which was also what happened with 28 Years Later. And then I watched it again this week, and I liked it just as much, if not more, this time around. And I noticed a lot more things, and I took a lot more notes. And I think, yeah, this movie is really phenomenal for the reasons that we've already talked about, so I won't repeat myself.
I think part of what I liked about it too, when we talk about it being literary, was I felt the pacing was really good in this 2-hour time span. Such an emotional arc, but it doesn't feel like we've been left out of anything. And really, the time span is quite short, but when you're a teenager, everything feels expansive.
Right. Because you have to live the emotional arc of Mira's relationship to Shri, but then also the emotional arc of her relationship to her mom and how her mom also has this relationship with Shri. It's this triangulation thing happening. And I feel the complexity of all three of those relationships very acutely and felt the catharsis when they all reached their high points, which were also maybe their low points.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere you want to start?
No, I definitely have things I want to talk about that probably that thought would lead down, but I just don't feel I want to talk about other things. I want to talk about some of your things first.
Okay. I could start with this thought I had, which mirrors a thought I had when we talked about some of the other movies that we've discussed. But the school specifically that has been created for this film, I was just so struck by the confusing nature of how the girls are expected to be mature while also being treated like they're totally helpless at the same time. There's this emphasis on making sure your skirt isn't too short, making sure your socks are high enough as a way to not distract boys or put yourself in danger. One teacher literally says, don't talk to boys unless necessary. But then we also reveal that one of these boys wants to propose marriage to Mira at the same time. And Mira's mother tells a story of when she was Mira's age and in that school, and like this boy who wanted to propose to her. And so just this situation of conditioning these girls to have no experience socializing with boys, but then also at the same time believing that they're almost ready for marriage. And Mira is especially given this particular responsibility as the prefect, and how she's given a unique position of authority over other students. But that authority, because she's a student given authority over other students, that primes the other students to undermine the authority that she's been given. And we see other teachers also undermine the authority she's been given. Like when she talks to the teacher about the boys who are standing at the bottom of the stairwell to take pictures of girls under girl skirts as they're coming down the stairs. And the teacher initially doesn't want to do anything about it. I just felt so frustrated on behalf of all these girls that when Mira as an individual character is expressing those frustrations, it all felt very true to me. And I felt for her so deeply since she's our conduit into this world.
Yeah. And also talking about this backdrop of the separation between boys and girls and those boys getting in trouble. Like they did end up being disciplined, which I was happy to see for taking those photos. But Mira's friend, Priya, has some kind of flirtation with one of those boys that was taking pictures of girls' skirts. And so I think it just goes along with this, the impossibility of being a young girl, like the infantilization versus the adultification, right? We're supposed to be both of these things, like you mentioned. And also that teaches us to excuse behavior. And in many cases, for many people, sets us up to be in marriages with this sitcom husband who doesn't fucking do anything. What do they call it? The lovable idiot kind of situation. And like, listen, I understand when you're a teenager, you do stupid shit. I've done really stupid things as a teenager. But taking pictures up someone's skirt, that's more than just teenager behavior. It is character defining if it is not addressed. And even though they were disciplined for it in that setting, they aren't necessarily going to be disciplined for different iterations of that behavior once they're adults themselves.
They are suspended, and we do see a brief scene where Mira's walking by and she sees one of the boy's fathers berating the boy. And it's very brief, but I get the sense that he's more just mad that a suspension is now on his son's record, and that might affect his ability to go to university or whatever, than the fact that his son was displaying predatory behavior towards girls. Just like how at the end of the movie, when these boys are chasing Mira, part of it is definitely fueled in retaliation to the fact that she reported this behavior of theirs. But then one of these boys also expressed romantic interest in Mira, and she very politely said, "I'm not interested," and he is not processing that appropriately. And they're like, "Why'd you break the heart of our boy?" or something like that as they're chasing her. The first time I watched it, I was genuinely worried that something really bad was going to happen to her. And so she manages to get into the girls' dormitory area and lock the door so that they are not able to get to her. And who knows what they might have done to her if they had been. And that's when she calls her mom and is like, "Mom, I need you to come pick me up. Like, something's wrong." And her mom arrives, and eventually the teacher also arrives. And the first thing the teacher says to the boys is like, "Why are you over here? You're not supposed to be over here." And it's like the issue that the teacher is seeing, which maybe she doesn't know the full story yet, but it's just that you're breaking a rule of the school by being a boy in the girls' area. Not that you were intimidating a classmate in a way that had the potential to escalate to physical or sexual violence, which is where my brain was going. And then their response is, "Well, talk to Mira. She's been having sex with this other boy and having him over to her house." And then that's the first thing the teacher wants to talk about when she goes to see Mira and her mom. It's just so frustrating and heartbreaking to see. Throughout the whole movie, Mira is trying to be the best person she can be, both in terms of holding up her responsibilities at school, being that like academic striver that her parents want her to be, while also trying to be a good girlfriend to the best that she can be to this boy. And it's just always somehow contorted against her in a way that I think is very, even though this movie is very culturally specific, as all movies usually are, I think that sense of contortion is something that anyone, especially a girl or woman, could relate to, no matter where she grew up.
And bringing up the example of when the boys were chasing her, that's what I meant when I said, they're going to face consequences in this setting, but iterations of those behaviors are going to continue out in the world, for which they will likely face no consequences. Because I was thinking about that too, that scene where we do see the boys being disciplined like by their parents. And I think one of the comments is like, you're supposed to be focusing on your studies. So the problem is, now this is on the record. They're supposed to be studying, but they're off chasing girls. It wasn't approached as if this is predatory behavior. It's that, why are you, I don't know, like it's like boys will be boys kinds of.
Right.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And that's why where we get this title in part. Because the boys are just being boys and they should be focusing on the studies. But the girls, yes, they should be focusing on their studies. And also they should be keeping the boys in check and making sure the boys are focusing on their studies.
And what I love about the presence of Anila, Mira's mother, and this makes me think about the title, is that we do get to see so much of Mira existing in a private space. And that's where this distinction, I think, between boys will be boys and girls will be girls emerges. And obviously the phrase boys will be boys has a long history and it's a very loaded term, and we tend to associate it with boys doing inappropriate or violent behaviors that they're able to get away with under patriarchy. Most often those behaviors being directed towards women. And so there's not really like a one-to-one mirror to that when we're talking about girls because of just the imbalance in power that exists in our world. But I think my favorite scene in the whole movie maybe is when Mira is home for the weekend and she's in her bedroom and she's standing in front of the mirror and she's putting lotion or something on her arms and her face. And she has music playing in the background and she starts dancing to the music in front of the mirror. And you can tell at the same time she's sort of like, she's just feeling herself. She feels confident in how she looks. You can tell she's thinking about this boy she met who she likes and thinks is cute and like she wants to kiss him or whatever. And it's just this extended sequence of her moving her body and feeling good in her body and feeling good about her body. And because that moment is private, we get to see what a freeing moment it is for her. And that's the type of moment that maybe wouldn't get to exist if she didn't have this private space to retreat to. But then the issue, what she's sort of doing in private becomes problematized once it becomes more public knowledge or begins happening in a public sphere. And that's where this idea of like girls will be girls also gets problematized along with that. But I really love that we have those private moments with her.
I think too, in talking about the movie title, Girls Will Be Girls, there is definitely something unexpectedly empowering about the way we're seeing that phrase interpreted. And I say unexpectedly because of its counterpoint, boys will be boys, where the connotation is like it is boys, like you said, enacting inappropriate misogynistic behavior typically, right? Or just violent behavior or socially unacceptable in some way. But that is excused by the same society that also deems it unacceptable. What is this film really saying when we think of the phrase girls will be girls in the context of this film is like girls will be studious, girls will do the right thing, girls will be brave, girls will do the hard work of living so that those around them feel loved and cared for.
And also girls will explore their sexuality in a personally fulfilling and respectful way, a way that is respectful to their partners and is literally not harming anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So why is it a problem?
And also, like you mentioned in your notes, girls will sometimes hate their moms for being nice to them. Like, why? It's so complicated. It's so complicated. And the way this film asks us to read that complication is smart and generous and forgiving. I get the sense that in both of the dance scenes, right? In the first dance scene, we get Mira, she is feeling herself, as you said, and then her mother comes in and her mom wants to dance with her, wants to have this moment.
And the mood is immediately killed.
Yeah. And Mira sort of starts to move a little bit. Then she's like, wait, no, as she's watching her mother. And then later we get another dance scene where Mira starts dancing and then she's dancing with Shri, and then her mother comes in and joins them and sort of cuts in and starts dancing with Shri to like swing dance with him a little bit. And that upsets Mira. And the complex nature of this, the way I'm reading it and the way I think the film wants us to read it, is that Mira is simultaneously experiencing like a kind of envy for her mother having already lived into her womanhood and like understanding her body and feeling comfortable in it. And also wanting to think of herself as independent of her mother.
Right. This was the main thing I wanted to talk about because this is what I loved so much about this movie is the really layered relationship between Mira and Anila because Anila is the authority figure in this house. Mira's father is not living there really. The way they explain it is that this house used to belong to Anila's mother. They've kept it because it's near Mira's school. But then her father works a job in a different city, so he lives there most of the time. And we see him visit in, I think, 2 or 3 scenes. But most of the time, it's Anila here alone. And then when Mira's like home from school on the weekend, it's the 2 of them there. And so Anila is the primary authority figure in this house. What I was reading was this frustration that Mira has that her mom gets to be close to Shri in ways that Mira can't simply because her mom is the mom who is in charge of this house. They get to just sit next to each other and have these really casual, unfiltered, less filtered conversations without anyone watching them because Anila is the authority figure. Whereas when Mira and Shri want to sit and have a conversation, it's like the bedroom door has to stay open. And you know that Anila can walk in at any minute or she can maybe hear them. That doesn't stop them from trying some stuff, which I respect. But it's like she gets to see her mom in some ways have the relationship with him that she herself wants to have. Not because the relationship is sexual or because there's any romantic physical intimacy between them. But there's a freedom to how they get to interact with each other that is not there between Mira and Shri. And so in that sense, I really understand and empathize with Mira's jealousy and frustration. But I also understand Anila feeling really good that she can help take care of this other child. And also I get the sense that like the way he talks with her and treats her, she feels respected by him, which that gets more complicated later in the movie. But I'm like, when is the last time a man showed her this much respect in her life? Because in the brief glimpses we see of her husband, he doesn't really show her that respect. So I also was like rooting for their dynamic while also acknowledging and empathizing with the friction it was causing Mira.
And I think for a lot of the movie, I was just thinking about it on even broader terms, but I 100% agree that, yeah, because her mother is an adult, she gets to make the rules in her house. And there's no rules that she wouldn't be able to talk to Shri. She's not going to do anything, quote unquote, inappropriate with him. Mm-hmm. She doesn't have to focus on her studies. Mm-hmm. And she gets to be a parent to him because he doesn't have parents immediately available to him, or that perhaps, I get the sense, aren't even that interested in being parents to him. And so, yeah, their relationship is fulfilling to her in like a variety of ways. And that is what I love so much about that first dance scene where it's just Mira and her mom, because it opens it up into, okay, it is about Shri, but also it's just about Mira wanting to be an adult and wishing she could be an adult and make these decisions for herself. And her mother's already done that and can do that. There can be, in some senses, I'm going to use the word universal, but we know that it's not technically universal, right? But it's like an archetypal, right? This archetypal mother-daughter relationship where you're butting heads because you want her to be your mother. You don't want to be like her, but you are like her. But you want your independence from her, but you need her. You know? And it's impossible. And we see that played out over and over again. And I just think that first dance scene was just so smart. It was well timed and gave us so much insight into their relationship and what was happening.
Yes. And I think the choice that is so kind and human is that Anila knows that her daughter is trying to put distance between them. She knows that her daughter is annoyed with her. She knows that there is this friction that perhaps just feels like it has bubbled up out of nowhere. And for the most part, we kind of just see Anila take it. And I don't mean that in a way meant to disparage her character or act like she has no spine or anything. And Mira does say some genuinely hurtful things to her, which will be recognizable to anyone who has been a teenage girl talking cruelly to their mother. We see Mira say some really unkind things to Anila. And those things don't really erupt into a fight or anything. Anila's just like, okay, I'm going to shut up, or okay, I'm going to walk away. And it just really put into perspective the choices every day on the fly parents have to make in navigating their relationships with their children. Because I think Anila knows that one day when she really needs me, she's going to let me know that she needs me. And if I try to push back on all these ways that she's pushing me away and try to stop this distance, then she's not going to react when she really does need me. And so you're seeing her make all these small sacrifices, both in her relationship with her daughter and also in standing up for herself, because she just understands one day my daughter is going to need me and I will obviously be there for her, but I am going to need her to be the one to initiate that call. And that's exactly what happens, but it's not in a way that's ham-fisted or whatnot. Because who else was Mira gonna call when those boys were chasing her and she was locking herself in a room hiding? And then that really opens up their relationship, because in that meeting with the teacher, she sees her mom stand up for her and her mom say, I get to decide who comes into my home. You cannot punish my daughter for me saying that this student could come into my home. And then that all culminates in the final scene when they're on the roof and Mira is oiling her own hair and Anila comes out and she asks her mom if her mom wants oil in her hair. And as she's oiling the hair, she starts to cry and then they like embrace and it's so sweet.
And I start to cry.
And yeah, we all start to cry. It's blocked and framed so beautifully. But that just made me realize there are so many moments I can't even remember where I know I was mean to my mom and I pushed her away and she just had to fucking take it for perhaps her own sanity, but also to preserve a future that she couldn't even predict yet, if that makes sense. And I had never, ever really thought about it in those terms until I watched this movie.
I have responses. The first one is kind of tangential. We might take it out, but I feel like it's worth mentioning.
Okay.
So thinking about like how we can be cruel to our mothers. And that is definitely the case with my mom. And honestly, in some ways, like that has never ended. There are still things that she'll say or do. And I respond like a teenager. I'm like, no, I don't need this from you. But as I've gotten older, and it's really just within like the last like 5 years or so of my life, maybe, it's this unspoken thing that is happening between us, but we're both aware of it now. And neither of us can stop it from happening, but nor do either of us take it too seriously. So like a concrete example, the last time I was at home, which was just a few weeks ago, my mom, and she's always giving me things. This is where a lot of our, like, she wants to give me, so she'll be like, Megs, do you need this? Megs, here's this. Megs, here's this. And I'm like, I don't want things. I don't need more things. We have a things problem. I have many things. She's always wanting to give me things. I don't need this. Oh. And so she comes and she hands me these, there's like an Amazon like store, like an Amazon return store in my hometown now that my mother frequents. So she's always buying random things from there. And I'm sitting there reading a book, okay? And she walks up to me and she's like, here. And I was like, what are these? And she's like, they're those things you put on your refrigerator handles. those like Velcro like pad things you can put about around like a refrigerator handle or like on your like oven handle. It's just like a pad.
Okay. So it's softer?
It's soft. Yeah, I don't know exactly what the purpose of it, but my mother loves them. She has them on her fridge. She has them on her.
Maybe it makes it easier to grip as your joints age and stuff.
Yeah. Maybe. I
Okay.
don't know, okay? But she had a pack of 8 of them, and they were bright velvet red. And she was like, "Here, they're for your refrigerator." I said, "What?" I was like, I don't understand what these are." We're going back and forth with me trying to figure out what they are. And finally I was like, "Oh, for the I was like, "I don't have handles on my refrigerator." Like we're both so annoyed at this point. I was like, "I don't even have handles on my refrigerator." And she goes, "Well, where are you going to put them then?" And I said, "Nowhere. I don't want them. I'm not taking them." And we both started laughing really hard because it was like, we were genuinely getting frustrated with each other. But she's like, "Where are you going to put them?" I'm like, "Nowhere. I don't need them. I don't need." And it's because we both realized in the same moment, I understand you're trying to do this nice thing for me, but I don't need them because the things that I would use this with don't even exist in my life. And she's realizing that, oh, I want to give this thing to my daughter, but she literally doesn't need it because the thing that it is for doesn't exist in her life. You know what I mean? And that's been the same argument that we've been having for, almost 4 decades.
I relate very strongly to the story.
So yeah, we could take all that out, but I was
we're
like,
keeping that.
No,
that's amazing. And I think, and it's one of those things where you've probably been having an iteration of that argument your whole life.
Forever.
But it just becomes different as you get older because you have forged a new level of independence. You have proven your capability of taking care of yourself. When you're 16, you think you've proven that, but you actually haven't.
Mm-hmm.
And you just also understand with time that, oh, it's not that serious. Whereas when you're 16, you don't know that. Or rather, it is that serious because you're 16.
Yeah. And depending on your character, because my younger sister responds much differently than me. She's like, "Maggie, just take the fucking refrigerator handle holder things." And she would just take them. Whereas I would be like,
she's like me, conflict avoidant.
Yeah, I can see. And whereas I'm like, I don't need them. I don't need them.
I think your reaction, you're just putting it out in the open and actually addressing the issue rather than deflecting. It seems right. It strikes me as healthy, and I wish I had those impulses, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. And sometimes I wish I didn't, though. Sometimes I wish my impulse was to just be like, you know what, I'll just take these fucking things. There's 8 of them. First of all, why are you giving me 8? It's not like I have 8 refrigerators.
Well, that's a capitalism problem, is now they sell everything in fucking multi-packs.
Yes. Who has 8 refrigerators? Well, probably people out there with 8 refrigerators. Okay, but anyway, either way, you learn to understand each other, but you're still going to keep doing it. And now I just kind of love that. Like, okay, this is how my mom wants to take care of me. It's not how I need to be cared for, but it's really not hurting me,
To bring it back to the movie, I think of that sorry scene when there's that special event, the teacher day, where all the girls are going to be in the sorry. And we see at one point at home, Anila and her trying on the outfit and practicing doing the folding and being like, okay, so this is how we're going to fold it and pin it. And then on the actual day, Mira does not want to see her mom. And I don't even remember exactly why. And her mom keeps trying to help. Be like, let me help you. Let me help you. I want to help you. And Mira eventually just has to be like, go away. And there's a very steely tenor to her voice. She doesn't say it kindly, but she doesn't scream. She's firm and it's cold, but it's not this overblown public reaction meant to embarrass her mother in front of other people. And her mom just takes it and it's like, okay, fine. And then later that afternoon, she needs her mom because she's being chased by evil boys and she calls her.
Yep. And her mom's there.
Right. And she's there fucking immediately.
That brings us back around to another thing that I did want to mention was that we get this scene where Shri takes the book that Anila is reading and reads a few lines from it, and it's like some romance. And it's just like a funny moment. Haha, like this is what you're reading. And then Mira, oh my God, delivered so cold, so chilling. For what? For no reason. It's totally things that I've said to my mother. She goes, you bought that trash with his money, saying she's buying these trashy books with her father's money or whatever, as if Mira doesn't benefit like her entire fucking life from her father's money, and as if her mother doesn't make sure that their lives continue. Anyway, right? All of that is there. And just Anila says nothing and ends up going to make chai.
Yeah.
And she brings the chai to Shri and herself, but she leaves Mira's cup in the other room. And it's very intentional. She's like, I'm not going to bring you, I'll make this fucking chai. I'm not going to bring it to you too if you're going to talk to me like that. It was just like this subtle way that you saw Anila being like, I can only take so much before I pull back a little bit, at least. And I thought that that was a good scene. And I think it's another example of about how like this movie really wants you to read it. You really have to read all of these actions.
There could be a really obvious line of dialogue where Anila's like, you want your chai, you go get it.
Yeah.
But even that one excision and just forcing you to pay attention to the details and the props and stuff, I think elevates it a lot. Because in very close interpersonal human relationships, you're always reading those kinds of nonverbal details with each other. And so it's just another way that I think the movie really successfully leans into the realism and naturalism.
And then also to go back to that line you mentioned where where Anila says to the principal, she's the principal, right?
I think so.
I get to decide who comes into my home. We kind of see in that moment, Mira was like, oh my gosh. I don't know if it's quite paradoxical. I think it feels that way to Mira, where she realizes the decisions that her mother is making for her in the home that Mira feels so stifled by are actually a kind of freedom, are actually her mother practicing her freedom to provide Mira with a certain level of freedom that she would not have otherwise. And we know that Anila is doing this intentionally because we get that scene where they're talking about Mira's cousin who at 19 or whatever ran off with her music teacher. Nobody can find her. She won't come, or maybe they can find her, but she won't come back home. And so Anila does verbalize. She doesn't want to put too many restrictions on Mira because she doesn't want to push her away.
Being a mom is like 4D chess or something. Not that I've ever played 4D chess because I don't know how to play regular chess. But that scene you're mentioning where it all suddenly kind of sinks into Mira when her mom very clearly stands up for her at the school. When her mom first lays out this plan, because at the beginning of the movie, Mira's talking on the phone to Shri in her bedroom on a landline, because this movie, it's not clear when this movie is set, but my guess is like late 90s, early 2000s, because they use landlines and like CD players, and they go to an internet cafe to use the internet, and no one has a cell phone. So I suspect it's slightly in the past. But she's in her bedroom talking to him on the phone, and she hears her mom coming. So she just hangs up really fast and she hides the phone on the bookshelf. And her mom comes in and is like, who are you talking to? And Mira lies and says that she's studying. And her mom's like, no, I heard you talking to someone. At first, her mom's just sort of like, you're not supposed to be on the phone right now. You're supposed to be studying. But she can tell based on the way, like if it was just a friend who was a girl, Mira wouldn't probably be lying about it. So she knows. So she's like, just please be honest with me. And that's where she mentions the stuff with the cousin and is like, they were too restrictive with her and now she won't come home. And I don't want it to be like that with you. And so that's when Anila calls the school and is like, I want to talk to this boy, and she gets the permission for him to leave campus so he can visit their home. And throughout that whole interaction, as Anila is being very clever at finding a way for them to spend time together, Mira is fucking pissed at her.
Yes, I know.
She's so annoyed the whole time. And I can understand that because now, in a way, she's in her mom's debt. Or now, potentially, this is something my mom could hold over me if I screw this up. And it goes back to that wanting to be independent from her mom and not quite realizing that in order to forge some semblance of independence right now at this point in her life, she needs her mom's help to be able to do that. And she just wants to be free from all of it. But the social structure she's living in doesn't quite allow that. She needs her mom's help in order to break free a little bit. She's so unaware of this throughout the whole movie, I think, because she was so annoyed with her mom when the plan initially came into fruition. And it doesn't click until the end of the movie. And she sees her mom stand up for her and is like, oh, this is what she's been doing the whole time. And I was just annoyed by her presence that I didn't fucking see it. I did want to talk about Shri a little bit. And you had also mentioned that you had things about some of the other movies we've talked about. So those are the two main things that are on my radar still.
Okay.
Did you want to go first?
I can. While I was watching this movie, and you've already mentioned Starling Girl, I did think about Starling Girl, but I also thought about Portrait of a Lady on Fire and Makeup. And I was like, what's happening here? Obviously, all of these movies are about many things, but at their core, plot-wise, some kind of sexual awakening. I can see someone maybe having some pushback using the term sexual awakening in regards to the Starling Girl specifically, because the predatory nature of that relationship, which we talk about extensively in that episode, and the nuances there and the complication of her predator also being a victim of the church's ideologies. So I don't feel like I need to say anything more. But for our intents and purposes in this conversation, I'm going to go out on a limb and refer to it as a kind of sexual awakening. Jem did come to realizations of what she wanted and also what she did not want. That's like the sort of like obvious thread between them all. But beyond that, there were kind of like two tracks that merge: the absence or presence of a mother figure, and then also the nature of that sexual awakening. Was it heterosexual, or in the case of Portrait of Lady on Fire and Makeup, these were queer awakenings, right? And in the Makeup episode, we have a conversation about how you wanted more characterization with a protagonist, Ruth. And I was fine with the abstraction and the surreality of it. And that's where we focused our attention. But also for me, that I don't remember if we talked about it in that episode or if we did. It felt like the bigger argument was about the abstraction because the nature of the film was very surreal. But I actually felt like there was plenty of characterization in that movie with our protagonist. I didn't need more. I understood what she was thinking and feeling in every scene. But I think why it felt like, and perhaps objectively there was less characterization, which I'm hesitant to say in retrospect, is the absence of family. And I think that a similar situation happens in Portrait of Lady on Fire. It's happening. Her coming to herself is coming to know herself, but perhaps coming to herself, maybe just literally, sexually, I don't know, is also happening in the absence of family. Her mother leaves. And so, I don't know, maybe this is an obvious observation, but in Starling Girl and Girls Will Be Girls, the sexuality that they're exploring, the sexual abuse that Jem is subjected to, is heterosexual. And so it's still like happening within society. The problem is that it's happening, but there isn't the added complication of the gender of the person it's happening with. The mothers are present, the families are present, these social structures are like so present. And the characters have a better sense of who they are. So we have a better sense of who they are because Jem in the Starling Girl and Mira, right? Jem and Mira are both having these experiences within the context of their families and of society. So they're either living into those expectations or moving against them. But either way, those lines are pretty clear. Whereas when we have these queer awakenings, as with Eloise and Ruth in Portrait of a Lady on Fire and Makeup, respectively, thinking back on Portrait of a Lady on Fire, what do we actually know about Eloise, though? In terms of like her character, in terms of Ruth's character in Makeup, what do we really know about their characters beyond the confines of their lives? It's not much. And I think that it's because there aren't clear expectations for them in terms of their sexuality, because it is queer, definitionally outside of the norm. That means they don't have any role models. They don't have expectations, but also then they maybe don't have any role models to say, what do I want to live up to and what am I actually moving against? And so I think in films like that, like we don't maybe understand the characters as much because the characters don't understand themselves as much, and because they have to step out of the social structures in order to even explore their sexuality. Whereas when there is this element of heteronormativity, that sexuality is still existing. I don't know if I'm trying to make like a claim about queer awakenings versus like non-queer awakenings and the way writers and directors handle the characterization of those characters to reflect the very real ambiguity around what does it mean to be queer and the paradox of wanting someone to just tell you that so you know what you want your life to look like, and also wanting the freedom to define it for yourself. And that's also the paradox of being a teenager and wanting role models and also wanting to find your own way. But when it comes to these characters that are living more into a heteronormative sexuality, some of the characterization is already done. We already have some kind of blueprint for maybe who they're supposed to be.
I see what you mean. And I'm going to specifically focus on Girls Will Be Girls and Portrait of a Lady on Fire just because those two movies have this prominent mother-daughter relationship happening, in that ultimately what Mira realizes is that her close contact with her mom is actually what allowed her to be more free to explore her sexuality. And we have the exact opposite thing happening in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, where once the mom leaves the castle and it's just Marianne and Heloise and the cook alone in this house, they become more free to explore their sexuality. And in Makeup, she's totally away from her family, but she does have her boyfriend there. And you could argue that he is functioning similarly to the mom in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, in that once she escapes his presence, then, and she stops eating his like nasty spaghetti sandwiches.
I mean, I'm not hating on a spaghetti sandwich.
I know. Because that was not the primary issue with that relationship by far.
He was gross,
to
though.
be clear. There was a lot of problems, possessiveness, whatever. Once she escapes that, then she has much more freedom to explore her sexuality. And I think the reason that Mira's close contact with her mother is able to aid in her sexual liberation is because the sexual awakening she's having is of heterosexual nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that is worth pointing out. And I think, too, when you are having sexual or romantic feelings that fall outside the heteronormative spectrum of your culture, that can subsume your entire view of the world, that sense of alienation or fear. And that can become the totality of who you are. I'm not saying that depicting that is poor characterization. That's not how I feel at all. I just feel like I wanted Ruth to have a hobby. Like Heloise, at least we know that she likes music and taking walks. I just wanted Ruth to have a hobby. But we don't need to like totally. And again, I might watch that movie now, makeup, and totally have a totally different take on it than I did a year ago. That was, I think, my main issue with the characterization. But I totally agree with what you're saying, this argument you're posing about how a queer versus heterosexual sexual awakening, particularly within the specific cultural confines of how you live, does affect the person that you become and the character you present to the world.
Yeah. Thanks for helping articulate that, because that it was what I was getting at.
Well, thank you for bringing it to my attention. I wouldn't have put all those movies together myself. So
I just felt like they were talking to each other so much.
I think they are.
And also, I think part of the issue is that Ruth didn't know what her hobbies were.
Yes.
I don't think she's ever had
I
an
think she was in a
opportunity
codependent relationship or something with her boyfriend. Or at least he was overly dependent on her, I should say. And that was subsuming everything. She just needed to get away from him.
Well, and I think there's something like, there's some class disparities happening here too, whereas like Heloise like clearly had the time to be like, I like to go for walks. I like to listen to music. Ruth came up to this random like RV park with a sack, and we don't know where her family is, but I get the sense she's very working class is the sense that we get. She hasn't been able to go for leisurely walks on the beach.
That is true.
Figure out that she likes them.
That is true. That's why it's important for her to meet the girl with all the wigs and the nail polishes.
Yeah. And she's like, oh.
And she can be like, ooh, fun.
I can be other people. I can figure out what I like.
Yeah.
And there isn't that added complication with Mira. Jem does end up running away in the end for a lot of reasons, but in part, the restrictions her mother has placed on her has made it impossible for her to live into herself and into her joy and into her happiness. Whereas Anila, she's aware that that could have been the outcome, and she consciously makes a different decision. And so in the end, we have that beautiful scene that you talked about where Mira, in coming towards an understanding of herself, also moves closer to her mother. So there's that contrast too.
Yes. If you haven't watched all the movies that we've just been talking about, you should watch them so you understand what's going on. Also, they're good.
And there are episodes for all of them.
Yes.
I don't know if I specifically mentioned that, but we did an episode on all of those movies.
I think that leads us into talking about Shri and where his relationship with Mira falls apart. Because when I first watched this movie, and once it became clear to me that this movie wasn't about a girl's mom grooming her boyfriend.
Yeah, what the fuck? I'll never get over that. Okay.
I hate that I keep bringing it up, but it was just so wild. Once it became clear it wasn't about that, in the beginning, I was all in on this relationship between the two of them. I liked him. I thought he was sweet. I thought he was cute. It was really interesting to watch this movie as an American person who's been inundated with a lot of American media made for teens, because if this were following the American script, I feel like it would be that, yes, Mira's really smart and she's really accomplished and teachers really respect her and she's going to go on and do great things, but she's a geek and she has self-confidence issues, or it would be like she's all that, where she's obviously gorgeous and amazing, but he still somehow has to feel embarrassed about like being seen with her. None of that is present in this movie. He immediately meets her. It's very clear that he likes her. He's excited to teach her about astronomy and she's excited to learn. And they're cute together. So all this to say, I think this revelation, I don't know, because, okay, what happens is that near the end of the film, Shri makes this comment where he's like, everyone has keys. And Mira's like, what do you mean by that? And he's like, everyone has something about them that if you know how to use that to your advantage, then you can get what you want or need from them. And Mira's like, so what's my key? And he says, no bullshit. And then her mom is in the room and she asks, well, what's my key? He basically tells her, like, I can tell that you like cooking for me and helping take care of me. So, like, I want to take what it is that you offer. And she accepts that because I think to a certain extent it's true. And then later in private, he and Mira have a discussion. She asks him if that's really what he feels about her mom. And he says, and this is a direct quote, she needs attention. That works in our favor, though. And we see Mira immediately shut down to this. And then he asks if he can come visit again and see her again. And she doesn't say anything, but we take that to mean no. She just shuts the door. And then it's the last scene where she's oiling the mom's hair and crying. So I interpret that as a breakup. And I interpret it as Mira realizing, she's concurrently realized how much her mom has done for her, has sacrificed for her, has stood up for her. And in that sense, she has gained a new level of respect for her mom. And at the same time, she's realized that, oh, I don't think this boy actually respects my mom. He was just pretending to respect her because it was a way for us to be together. And I buy all of that. But I just felt really bummed. I felt really bummed because I had wanted to like him.
Mm-hmm.
This is all a very long-winded way of asking how you were reading that character as the film progressed and what your reaction was to that final culmination of their relationship.
So at first, I did not trust him.
Okay.
And the only reason I began to is because Anila did. She said, you know, he's a good boy or something like that. And I was like, Anila seems cool as fuck. And she knows what's happening. She knows what's going on. I really trusted her. And I was like, okay, he's not like a bad guy. I'm going along with it. And yeah, we do get that scene that you mentioned. And I just want to give a little more details of the setting because it was felt really important to like my interpretation and my reading of the scene. They're sitting at the table, all three of them, when Shri says people have their keys, and he tells Anila, you know, your key is food or whatever. You liked feeding people. And the way Anila sort of pats him on the shoulder or something after he says that. And to me, that felt like Anila being like, you think that you know more than you do. It felt very much like, okay, child, you can believe this, but it's not.
Because obviously she is a grown-ass woman. She's more complicated than like, I feed you, right, and you say it tastes good and I give you anything you want.
So she knows that he's full of shit, but she's like, whatever. She doesn't care. She goes into the other room, and Shri's back is to the door through which we can see Anila still, but Mira is sitting on the other side of the table so she can see her mother. And the camera is focused on the mother from like where Mira is sitting. And so as that conversation goes on, and Shri's like, oh, her real key is that she needs attention. And Mira's like, so you're using her? And then the camera stays on Anila as Anila is doing some household task. I don't remember exactly what it is. She might be making chai or something. For just long enough that I get the sense that I'm like, oh man, sure, that's part of it. Sure, Anila deserves more attention than she receives. But that isn't her key. She doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. He's a teenage boy. But he might be right about Mira's key, which is that she doesn't like bullshit. And I think that that is Anila's as well. And in that moment, I think Mira realizes her and her mother are the same, that neither of them are willing to take any shit. Anila knows she deserves more attention, and she also knows she lives in a world where she's not going to get it. And so she's going to continue raising her daughter to be, you know, all these catchphrases that are often used against girls. She wants her daughter to be strong-willed and to know herself well. But despite all of these things, I still don't come away from the movie not liking Shri.
Right.
I think that he's just a teenage boy. And he hasn't been required to understand the world to the same depth that Mira is already starting to understand it. He doesn't have to, so he doesn't. It doesn't mean he never will. I think it's very likely that he might, given his nature. And also, I'm not going to blame a teenage boy for trying to like play on an adult's weaknesses so they can make out with their girlfriend in secret.
Yeah.
And so I do think like Mira ends up breaking up, not only because she feels protective of her mother. She doesn't want her mother being used by him, but also because she realizes she's already beyond him intellectually and emotionally. And she has to just let him go so that he doesn't end up holding her back.
Yeah. I really like that read on it. I agree with that. And I think I really like that the movie ends not on an unresolved note, but in the middle of a newly introduced tension, which is Mira having this emotional cry to her mother. Because even if breaking up with him was the right decision for the reasons that you have just mentioned, that doesn't mean she's not really sad about it. There was perhaps something empowering in standing up for her mom to him, but also that was painful at the same time. And I think it's really important that the movie acknowledges that untidiness, because coming of age stories often like to at least end tidily. And sometimes that is what you want from a movie, but sometimes that is a disservice to the story you've been telling. And I think in this case, it would have been.
Yeah, agreed. And like I think I said at the beginning, the emotional resonance of this film is really the relationship between Mira and Anila, not in the relationship between Mira and Shri. And so it makes sense that in a way it does end tidily, in that she has this realization about her mother and they are mended, at least for now.
Right. They'll
Like,
fight again.
Yeah, they're going to fight again. But there's a different kind of understanding and appreciation Mira has. She's going to have the same kind of fights with her mom. Well, I guess just like I had said, like my mother and I, we still are having these same fights, even though both of us understand what's happening now. But the dynamic is just embedded into who we are as people and who we are as mother and daughter. So that's all I got, I think.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. What does this movie make you want to tell your younger self?
I can't think of anything that I could tell my younger self that she would even like remotely understand or even be willing to listen to in terms of her relationship with her mother. I'd be like, no, I'll never be able to understand why my mother is the way that she is. She just wants to ruin my life and ruin my independence. And I don't know what I could say to her besides, you're wrong. Someday you are going to see your mother as a person, because she is. And you're going to be able to forgive her for the mistakes that she has made. Just the same that she has forgiven you already for every single mistake you have ever made and will continue to do so, even when you really honestly didn't deserve it, because you're her child.
I like it. I would tell my younger self that just because someone, specifically your mother, but not exclusively so, has the capacity to take the cruelty you fling and hold it and move on past it does not mean that they always should have to do that. So maybe try to not be an asshole sometimes. Or if you are, just acknowledge that, which I wouldn't have listened to either, but it's what I wish I could tell her.
I don't know that my younger self would have listened to anything.
Which we say all
I've
the
ever
time.
said. But in terms of thinking about her as a separate person and in terms of relationship with her mother, she definitely would have put wax in her ears.
Well, thank you so much for listening. We're back for now, hopefully. But who knows what will happen to us.
That we're gonna die?
No. Just life gets busy and stressful and overwhelming sometimes. So sometimes we have to take a step back.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling excited. Fall is coming.
Yeah, I'm happy about that.
We haven't decided what our next episode is going to be about, but I'm hoping it will be something seasonally themed. Thank you so much for listening. We're revamping our Instagram slowly. So if you want to follow us at Girlhood Movie Database, you can. I'm trying to post things, but I'm really bad at it. Not just in that I'm bad at making myself do it, which I'm bad at, but I'm also bad at figuring out what makes interesting content. I'm truly like an 85-year-old going on Instagram for the first time. Like that's where I'm at. So who knows?
You can still follow me on Instagram, but I'm like taking a social media hiatus for the next year. So at _Saint_Margaret_. I imagine there'll be times where I'll still have to post on there though for saying things potentially. But anyway, I think that's really it.
That's really it. If you're listening to this, you know that we are mysterious and we pop up when we pop up. Turn on post notifications so that way you never miss a new episode on whatever podcast streaming platform you're using. Also, if you haven't followed us and given us a good rating, we would love that as well.
Leave a review.
Leave a review. Tell your friends.
Yeah.
Because we like doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay. See you next time.